Welcome to the deep dive, where we like to go beyond the headlines and kind of explore the nuances of fascinating topics. And today we're diving into the world of hantavirus. It's a virus that often flies under the radar. You can find a lot more information on this at https://learnxyz-In.
Mm-hmm.
But it can have some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack what exactly hantavirus is, how it spreads, and most importantly, what you need to know to stay safe. So stick around to the end because we'll leave you with a final thought-provoking question to ponder.
Okay, that's good.
To guide us through this deep dive, we have our expert here who's been sifting through the latest research and insights on hantavirus.
That's right.
So let's just start with the basics. What exactly is hantavirus?
So hantavirus is a genus of viruses, and that means it's a whole family of related viruses. These viruses can cause serious illnesses in humans, primarily affecting either the respiratory system or the kidneys.
Okay, so it's not just one specific virus, but a whole group of them.
Yeah.
And they can cause some pretty serious health problems.
Exactly. And what makes hantavirus particularly interesting is that each type is usually linked to a specific rodent species.
Oh.
They're carried by rodents, and different rodents carry different types of hantavirus.
So it's not like encountering any rodent will put you at risk for any type of hantavirus.
Mm-hmm.
There's a specific connection between the type of virus and the type of rodent.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It is, and the specificity is really important for understanding how hantavirus spreads and where different strains are found geographically.
That makes sense.
Yep.
So how does this virus actually jump from rodents to humans? How do people get infected?
The primary mode of transmission is through inhalation. Think of it this way. Infected rodents shed the virus in their droppings, urine, and saliva. These particles can dry up and become aerosolized, basically turning into tiny dust particles that float in the air.
So it's like breathing in dust that's contaminated with the virus.
Precisely. And when humans breathe in that contaminated dust, they can contract the virus.
So if I see a cute little mouse scurrying around in my garden, should I be worried?
Not necessarily. While it's important to be cautious around rodents in general, just seeing a mouse doesn't mean you're going to get infected with hantavirus. The key is to avoid contact with rodents and their waste as much as possible.
Okay, so our source material mentions two main groups of hantaviruses. Can you tell us more about those?
Absolutely. There are what we call old world hantaviruses. These are mainly found in Europe and Asia. They cause a disease called hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, or HFRS for short.
Okay, old world hantaviruses found in Europe and Asia, and they cause HFRS. What does that entail symptom-wise?
Think flu-like symptoms, but with the added complication of potential bleeding and kidney issues.
Yeah.
It can range from mild to severe, but in some cases it can be life-threatening.
That sounds pretty serious. What about the other group of hantaviruses?
The other group is called New World hantaviruses, and these are found primarily in the Americas. They cause a different illness called Hantavirus Pulmonary Syndrome, or HPS.
So old world viruses cause HFRS, and new world viruses cause HPS.
Right.
And HPS affects the lungs.
Exactly. HPS is particularly concerning because it primarily affects the lungs and can be fatal. The SIN number virus, which we mentioned earlier, is a New World hantavirus that causes HPS.
That's unsettling to think that something as seemingly harmless as rodent droppings could lead to such devastating consequences.
It is. And what makes it even more challenging is that the early symptoms of both HFRS and HPS can often resemble a regular flu.
Oh, really?
Yep.
So someone might think they just have a cold or the flu, but it could actually be something much more serious.
Yes, and that's why early detection and medical care are so crucial. Knowing the risks, recognizing the symptoms, and seeking medical attention promptly can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Speaking of risks, let's talk about what we can do to protect ourselves.
Yeah, prevention is key, and it starts with understanding how the virus spreads. Rodent control and safe cleaning practices are absolutely essential.
So our source material from LearnXYZ-In goes into some detail about those prevention measures.
Yeah.
Let's unpack those, starting with rodent control.
Sure. The first step is to make your home less appealing to rodents. This means sealing up any entry points like cracks or gaps in walls, foundations, doors, and windows. Rodents can squeeze through surprisingly small spaces.
So it's like rodent-proofing your home.
Exactly. Next, you want to eliminate potential food sources, store your food in airtight containers, clean up crumbs and spills promptly, and make sure your garbage is securely stored in rodent-proof containers.
That makes sense. Deprive them of food and shelter, and they're less likely to stick around. What about if you already have a rodent problem?
If you suspect rodent activity, setting up traps or bait stations can help control the population, but it's important to do this safely and effectively. Follow the instructions on the product carefully and wear gloves when handling traps or bait.
Safety first. What about those safe cleaning practices you mentioned? Why are those so important?
Cleaning up after rodents, especially their droppings, can be tricky because you don't want to stir up the virus and make it airborne. That's where those safe cleaning practices come in.
So no quick sweep-ups if you spot some droppings.
Definitely not sweeping or vacuuming could actually release the virus into the air, increasing your risk of infection.
Oh, wow. So what's the right way to clean up rodent droppings?
The key is to use a disinfectant and avoid creating dust. First, ventilate the area by opening windows and doors, then mix up a disinfectant solution, 1 part bleach to 9 parts water, works well, or you can use a household disinfectant.
Okay, so ventilate the area, mix up a disinfectant solution. What's next?
Spray the droppings nests and any urine-soaked areas with the disinfectant solution. Let it sit for about 10 minutes to kill the virus. Then wipe it up with paper towels, wearing gloves, and a mask to protect yourself.
Those are some really practical tips. Anything else we need to keep in mind?
Absolutely. Always seal up the contaminated materials like the paper towels you used for cleanup in plastic bags before disposing of them in an outdoor trash can. And wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water after cleaning or handling any potential rodent-infested materials.
Those sound like simple but effective steps everyone can take. So we've covered rodent control and safe cleaning practices. Any other key prevention measures?
Yes, person protection is important, especially if you're in areas where hantavirus is more common, or if you're doing activities that might put you at higher risk.
Like what kinds of activities?
Things like cleaning out attics, basements, sheds, or barns that might have rodent infestations, or even camping or hiking in areas where rodents are prevalent.
What kind of personal protection do you recommend?
Wearing an N95 respirator can help reduce your exposure to airborne particles. You can find these at most hardware stores or online, and of course, always wash your hands thoroughly after being in areas where rodents might be present.
So it's all about being aware of the risks, taking preventative measures, and protecting yourself. It sounds like knowledge really is power when it comes to hantavirus.
It absolutely is. The more you know about this virus and how to protect yourself, the better equipped you'll be to stay safe.
So far, we've talked about what hantavirus is and how to prevent it. But what happens if someone does get infected? Is there a cure?
Unfortunately, there's no specific cure or FDA-approved antiviral drug for hantavirus infections.
That's concerning. So what are the treatment options if someone gets sick with hantavirus?
Treatment primarily focuses on managing the symptoms and providing what we call supportive care. This means helping the body fight the virus and preventing complications.
Okay, so it's about supporting the body while it battles the virus.
Yeah.
Could you give us some examples of what that supportive care might involve?
Absolutely. For HPS, which affects the lungs, oxygen therapy is often necessary. The virus can cause fluid to build up in the lungs, making it difficult to breathe, so patients might need supplemental oxygen or even a ventilator to help them breathe.
So close monitoring and respiratory support are key for HPS. What about HFRS, which affects the kidneys?
For HFRS, fluid replacement therapy is crucial. The virus can damage the kidneys, making it hard for them to filter waste products from the blood, so doctors will give patients 5E fluids to help support kidney function.
And in severe cases of HFRS, dialysis might be needed to help cleanse the blood.
Exactly. Dialysis is a procedure that filters the blood externally, acting like an artificial kidney.
So while there's no specific cure for hantavirus, early medical intervention and supportive care can significantly improve outcomes.
That's right. And it's important to remember that research is ongoing, and scientists are constantly working to develop new treatments and vaccines for hantavirus.
That's good to hear. It sounds like we've covered a lot of the basics about hantavirus, what it is, how it spreads, how to prevent it, and what the treatment options are. But there's always more to learn, right?
Absolutely. Hantavirus is a complex and fascinating virus, and there's still a lot we don't know about it.
Our source material highlights some interesting facts about hantavirus that I think our listeners would find intriguing. Let's delve into those, starting with the fact that each hantavirus species is typically linked to a specific rodent host. You mentioned this earlier, but can you give us some examples?
Sure. The Sin nombre virus, which is a major cause of HPS in North America, is primarily carried by deer mice. The Hantavirus, which causes HFRS in Asia, is associated with the striped field mouse. And the Pulmonary, another cause of HFRS, is carried by bank voles, which are found in Europe.
So knowing which rodents carry which strains can be really helpful for targeted prevention efforts.
Exactly. And this specificity also highlights the important connection between hantavirus and the environment.
You're right, our sources mention the impact of environmental factors on hantavirus outbreaks, something about increased rainfall in rodent populations.
Right. Changes in weather patterns, especially increased rainfall, can lead to more vegetation, which means more food for rodents. This can cause their populations to boom, which in turn increases the risk of human exposure to the virus.
Like a chain reaction. More rain, more plants, more rodents, more hantavirus. And with climate change potentially altering weather patterns, it's a bit concerning, isn't it?
It is. It underscores the importance of monitoring rodent populations and understanding how environmental changes might impact hantavirus transmission.
Our source material also points out that hantavirus has been found not just in rodents, but also in shrews and bats.
Yes, and this is where things get even more interesting while rodents are the main culprits. Research has shown that hantaviruses can also be found in other small mammals.
Wow, that's a bit unsettling. So it's not just about mice in the attic, potentially.
Exactly. It highlights the complex ecology of this virus and reminds us that there's still much to learn.
It seems like we're just beginning to unravel the mysteries of this virus.
We are, and while there's still so much we don't know, there's a lot of promising research underway too. Scientists are actively exploring new antiviral drugs and vaccine candidates.
That's encouraging, but for now, our sources emphasize that there's no specific cure and treatment focuses on supportive care.
Yes, that's right. Current treatment is about managing symptoms and helping the body fight the virus. Early hospitalization, especially for HPS, is crucial to improve chances of survival.
So being aware of the symptoms and seeking medical attention promptly is key. What are some of those key symptoms people should watch out for?
Early symptoms of hantavirus infection can often mimic the flu, including fever chills, headache, muscle aches, fatigue, and sometimes nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea.
So it can start out feeling like a typical flu or even a bad cold. What are some signs that it might be something more serious than just the flu?
For HPS, the hallmark symptom is difficulty breathing, which can develop rapidly. This is because the virus causes fluid to build up in the lungs, leading to respiratory distress.
So if someone starts having trouble breathing, especially if they've been in an area where they might have been exposed to rodents, that's a major red flag.
Absolutely. It's crucial to seek medical attention immediately in that case.
What about HFRS? Are there any specific symptoms that distinguish it from a typical flu?
With HFRS, in addition to the flu-like symptoms, people may also experience bleeding, such as nosebleeds, blood in the urine, or bruising. They may also have abdominal pain, back pain, and decreased urination due to kidney involvement.
So any signs of bleeding or kidney problems, along with those flu-like symptoms, should prompt a visit to the doctor.
Yes, definitely. Early diagnosis and treatment are essential for both HPS and HFRS.
It sounds like we all need to be more aware of the intricate connections between human health, animal health, and the environment.
I agree. Hantavirus is a perfect example of how those three elements are intertwined. Understanding these connections is crucial for preventing not just hantavirus, but many other zoonotic diseases as well.
That's a powerful takeaway. We need to think beyond ourselves and consider the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our actions can have ripple effects throughout the ecosystem.
It's fascinating how something like a tiny virus can have such a huge impact on our lives. And it's a reminder that we're all interconnected, humans, animals, and the environment.
Right.
Speaking of learning more, you can find a wealth of information about hantavirus on https://learnxyz.in. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from the basics of what hantavirus is to the complexities of its transmission, prevention, and treatment. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something else that our sources highlight: the history of this virus.
Yeah. The history of hantavirus is quite interesting. It actually dates back to the Korean War in the 1950s.
Oh, I remember reading something about that. Wasn't it called Korean Hemorrhagic Fever back then?
That's right. During the war, thousands of soldiers, both United Nations and North Korean troops, came down with a mysterious illness that caused fever, bleeding, and kidney failure.
And they eventually figured out that it was a new type of virus.
Exactly. It wasn't until years later in the 1970s that scientists were able to isolate the virus and identify it as a distinct entity. They named it the Hantavirus, after the Hantan River region in South Korea where many of the initial cases occurred.
So that's where the name hantavirus comes from, the Hantan River.
Yes, and the discovery of the Hantavirus marked a turning point in our understanding of these viruses. It sparked a surge of research that led to the identification of numerous other hantaviruses around the world.
It's amazing to think that this whole family of viruses was essentially unknown until relatively recently.
It is, and it highlights the importance of ongoing surveillance and research to better understand emerging infectious diseases.
Speaking of research, our sources mention that scientists are actively working to develop new antiviral drugs and vaccines for hantavirus. Can you tell us more about those efforts?
Sure. One promising area of research involves the development of antiviral drugs that can target specific steps in the hantavirus life cycle. For example, some researchers are investigating drugs that can inhibit the virus's ability to replicate inside human cells.
So if you can stop the virus from replicating, you can effectively stop the infection.
Exactly. And another area of active research is vaccine development. Several different vaccine approaches are being explored, including vaccines that use inactivated viral proteins or genetic material to stimulate an immune response.
And a vaccine would essentially train the body to recognize and fight off the virus before it can cause illness.
That's right. Vaccines have proven to be incredibly effective in preventing other viral diseases. So there's a lot of hope that a hantavirus vaccine could significantly reduce the burden of this disease.
It's encouraging to hear that there's so much work being done to combat hantavirus. But in the meantime, prevention remains our best defense.
Right. Absolutely. Until we have effective treatments and vaccines widely available, it's crucial to focus on preventing hantavirus infections in the first place.
And we've talked about those prevention measures in detail: rodent control, safe cleaning practices, and personal protection.
Right. It's all about minimizing contact with rodents and their waste and taking steps to protect yourself if you're in areas where hantavirus might be present.
You know, it's striking how much our understanding of hantavirus has evolved since those early cases during the Korean War.
It is, and it's a testament to the power of scientific research and collaboration. We've come a long way in identifying the virus, understanding how it spreads, and developing strategies to prevent and treat it.
But as you mentioned earlier, there's still so much to learn. Hantavirus continues to pose a threat to human health, and ongoing research is essential to stay ahead of this virus and develop even better ways to protect ourselves.
I agree, and it's a reminder that the fight against infectious diseases is never truly over. We need to remain vigilant, continue to invest in research, and work together to protect public health.
But you've given us a lot to think about today. Thank you for sharing your expertise on this complex and fascinating topic.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive into the world of hantavirus has been informative and thought-provoking. Remember, knowledge is power. If you want to delve deeper into this topic, head over to https://learnxyz.in for more in-depth resources, including that comprehensive article we've been referencing. It's a great starting point for continuing your exploration of hantavirus. Now, before we sign off, here's a final thought to leave you with. Given the connection between rodent populations and environmental factors, how might climate change impact the spread of hantavirus in the future? It's a question that researchers are grappling with, and it's one that we all need to be aware of as we face the challenges of a changing world. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into fascinating topics, and don't forget to visit https://learnxyz.in for even more in-depth resources. Thank you.